Looking at some of the things that have come out in more recent years, I know there have been some deathbed confessions. The Palmatier brothers, is there something to that? Do you know anything
No,
about
that we just talked about. Yeah, a lot of this stuff came up after the murders. What do you have for breakfast? Let's see. What do you have for breakfast last year in March? Let's pick out a date, like March 14th. What do you have for breakfast? What did you do that day? You're not going to do it. But no, these guys, months later, say, oh yeah, I saw somebody down the canyon. That was the day. Yeah, they had bloody clothes and the trunk open. Yeah, that's what I saw. And the telephone operator, I read all that stuff. That's not in the book. I read all that stuff because there was literally hundreds of tips, hundreds of points investigated, hundreds. And most of them were nothing to it, nothing to it, nothing to it.
So
That's another one that was investigated and the state police said nothing to it.
okay, so how about the Smokey Rona story?
Oh,
Anything there?
that's really easy. That's really easy to do. He said he was with 18 other people and were paid in excess of $20,000 or $25,000 in 1960 money. Let's talk about 1960 money. You could buy a new car for how much? Well, $2,500. You could buy a house for $10,000. 18 people killed them someplace else and lowered them into the canyon. Lowered them into the canyon by rope from the top. That story is ridiculous when you look at the details. Can 18 people keep a secret? No. Can 18 people keep a secret about a triple homicide? No.
Yeah.
It's a story. When you think about it, it doesn't make any sense at all.
What about a granddaughter coming forward to say that her grandfather on his deathbed said this was a mob hit and this is how it happened?
He never said that.
What?
He never said that. How are we going to prove it? How is she going to prove he said it? And how are we going to prove he didn't say it?
I don't know. So you know these documents more than any other human on earth living today. Is there nothing in there that would exonerate him anyway?
Nothing. Would I hide it? You've met me. You hear me talking. Do you think I would hide the fact that an innocent man was in jail? And let's talk about that in general terms a little bit. If I'm writing a book and I want people to read it, I want people to read it. That's why I was in journalism or in photography. I want people to look at my pictures. I want people to read the stories. I'm into communicating thoughts, ideas, images. Okay. How if I wrote a book, would I sell more copies if I prove he's innocent or I prove he's guilty? And I wasn't trying to do either. But think about it. If I went with the opinion that Chester's innocent and wrote a book about that, I would have to change in midstream because I would go, holy smokes. I would have sold more copies, right? Because I found an injustice. I have proof that the wrong man was committing this crime.
But you couldn't find proof.
No. Anybody else look for it? Anybody else spend 5 years of their life looking for proof? Anybody else read 25,000 pages of court reports, newspaper accounts, magazines? I estimate about 28,000 pages of information.
So I think it's safe to say that no human living left on Earth has researched this case more than you have. Yes? Fair statement?
Yes. I mean, that sounds, it's just I've had the material. If they're studying the case, they would have to come to me.
Some of the groundwork. In 1952, Chester was arrested on statutory rape charges in Oglesby under confession. Did you do it, Chester? Yes, I did. Yes, I denied it at first. Did you have blood on your clothes? Yes. Blood from what? Me, her? I don't know. July 24th, 1959, the 2 adults and 4 kids attempted robbery at Matheson State Park.
Give me that date again.
July 24th, 1959?
Oh, what do I have here? Oh, I have their statement, and I also have Weger's statement that he committed that act right here. And that was, he confessed to that crime without being asked.
And then, September 13th, 1959, a rape and robbery in Matheson State Park. Did she not later identify Chester Weger?
Yes, she did after confessed the murder. So it would be after November 17th, 1960. He was picked up on November 17th for the rape. They had him for the rape. She had already identified him and from a photograph. They took photographs of people down to her house, and she picked out Chester Weger from a pile of photographs. And then later on the night of his confession, that 17th of 60, the boy came in and identified Weger. So we have direct identification of him attacking people in the park, of him robbing people in the park, of him tying up people in the park. And it was only a few hundred yards away from his parents' home where he lived.
And then just 2 days before the Starved Rock murders happening on March 14th, 1960, there was a robbery attempt on Saturday, March 12th, 1960, 2 adults and a child.
In where? In St. Louis Canyon. So you've done exactly what I do at the speeches. We have this July case, boom. He confessed to that July robbery without being asked. You got anything else to tell us? Well, I think I robbed somebody back in the summer, blah, 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 blah. And they went back and these people contacted the police. So they had this on record in 60. Said, well, yeah, there was a case of a robbery at the park. This guy's telling us he did it. So, okay, July, boom. He confesses to that. The rape robbery, he's ID'd for that. The weekend before the murders, at the scene of the crime, confronting other women who said the only reason that he didn't attack us or bother us probably were because of the kids that were with us. They were with children. Mm-hmm. 2 days later, he's in St. Louis Canyon again. He's got to be the unluckiest person in the world. Luckily, the mobster didn't kill them when Chester was on the job. Wasn't that lucky?
Did he not change his story? Initially, he said he was in the basement of the lodge writing a letter to some woman who was not his wife, and then he said, "No, I went to Oglesby." That
change came decades after.
Decades
after
after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Thursday, the murders happened on a Monday. The bodies were found on a Wednesday. I don't know when it was, Thursday or Friday or that weekend, where they started interviewing lodge employees, right? So he was called in. He said, "What were you doing at the time at 1:30, from 1:30 to 3 or something in the afternoon on Monday?" He said, "Well, I was in the basement, the Starved Rock Lodge, writing a letter." You're right. So skip ahead. So all this is over. He's confessed. He's on trial for murder and stuff. Well, what's his alibi? His alibi was, I was in the basement writing a letter to that. So it jives with what he told the state cops, right? So to me, people forget, he was on trial for his life. We were not trying to put Weger in prison. LaSalle County was trying to kill Chester Weger for this crime. We were trying to put him in the electric chair. He uses that story when his life was online. Decades later, he said, I was someplace else that afternoon. I was with Stanley Tucker. I was with a friend. I was getting my hair cut. Oh, we heard the plane outside and we all ran out to look at it. In 1960, airplanes were not an unusual sight. We're not talking about 1920 here. There were airplanes in the air in 1960. So my point of it is, he had an alibi he was using when his life was on the line. And suddenly he changes his story. One of those two stories is a lie.
Understood. One thing I hear now is the theory of the 3 against 1. How could Chester Weger overpower 3 grown women? Just couldn't happen. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, very easy to understand. Chester Weger at the end of 1950s was in the Marine Corps. He was a trained to kill Marine. Let's ask any Marine if a trained Marine can handle 3 suburban housewives in their 50s.
In skirts in the middle of winter.
I asked that in my speeches. I asked a few women in the audience, when's the last time you took a hike in a skirt? When's the last time you took a hike in a dress? When's the last time you did this in the winter? And they all say, never. These women wear skirts, dresses, in a box canyon, one way in, one way out, 80, 90-foot walls on 3 sides of them, and a man blocking their path of retreat. 3 women in the dead of winter, in a strange location, miles away from anybody else, has a man attacked them, stopped them. Whatever they were thinking at that time in their panic, they knew one thing. This guy knows the park. We don't know the park. This guy knows the park. We're not getting out of here. We're not going to run up these walls.
So they have to follow his rules, which is, let's go back to the waterfall cave area. I'm going to tie you up. I'll go away. Someone will find you here soon.
And I believe that. You know why? The rape robbery. Go back to that. In September, he robs him. He attacks him. He rapes her. He ties him up. He leaves. Well, the speculation, it worked last time. He attacked 2 local kids in the park, only hundreds of yards away from the house that he was staying at. Only hundreds of yards in Oglesby across the Matheson Park. And he left those people alive. I said, well, he was. I believe his confession. And you just find out, his confession says, Mrs. Murphy ran up behind him, hit him with some binoculars, and that's when Chester said, I picked up a frozen tree limb and clubbed her. She goes down, and he realizes he has to go back and do damage to the other 2 to prevent identification, and that's what he does. How could one unarmed man attack, intimidate 3 women in a canyon? They're not in an alley. They're not in a department store. They're not in a parking lot.
There's only one way out.
One way in, one way out, in the middle of nowhere. You can scream all week long. Nobody's going to hear you. The park was really different in 1960 than it is today. You go down to St. Louis Canyon, somebody will be there.
Sure.
1960 in March, nobody was there.
Nobody was there.
So the point of it is, so he picks it up and he says, and so they're already tied up. So they can't. When they hit, imagine the horror of the 2 women watching their friend be beaten to death with a club and having the man step toward them, and they're tied up. Nobody knows how they're going to react when faced with violence.
Sure.
I don't. You don't. Anybody who says they do
is
is not telling the truth. I'm not going to predict how people act. I'm not going to say, well, I would never do that. Let me give you a clue here, too. If my wife and 2 of her friends were walking in the park and an unarmed man come up and gives them any kind of trouble or hassles them or attempts to rob them, they'll fight back. They'll probably kick the crap out of you. These women did it. I'm not going to speculate on why they did it or why they should have or what they did have. I only know what happened according to Chester Weger's words. Can a trained to kill Marine, and something else I studied in this book is go back and look at the Marines in the late 1950s and ask how many recruits were being killed during basic, who died during basic training. In the 60s, they changed that. You can find cases of moms and dads crying. They sent their kids to the Marine. They sent them back a body because it's tough, it's rough, and they had to relax some of the training that they had for these Marine Corps. He survived Marine boot camp. You think he's tough enough to take on 3 housewives? Oh, he's so small. He's so little. People see an 82-year-old man and think this guy was railroaded. They don't see a 21-year-old strapping young man, former Marine, do you?
Looking at some of the evidence that came out during the court proceedings, the scratches on his face, he passed off as he cut his face shaving.
Yes.
There was also, he had a wound under his right eye.
Yes.
According to his confession, came from the binoculars of Mrs. Murphy.
Yes?
And in court, as many as 7 people testified to the scratches on his faces, a host, a caretaker, cooks, dishwashers, chefs. So lots of people noticed that his face was scratched up. I don't know about you, but when I nick or cut myself shaving, I don't go back for more. I'm like real. I do have a problem with I cut myself shaving, or I had a collision with a medicine cabinet theory. I have a problem with that. That doesn't add up for me. Like I said, when I scratch my face, I don't go back for more, or I'm super careful and it doesn't happen again during that shaving. Your thoughts?
You know how brave you have to be to sit in a trial in front of hundreds of people and have the world look at the trial, not the county, not the state, not the nation, but the world. And you're in a you're in a murder trial that's going to involve capital punishment. Your words would help send a man to his death. How brave do you have to be to sit in that stand? It wasn't one person. It wasn't 2. It wasn't 3. I don't know the number. But it was 3 or 4 people testified that he had cuts and scratches on his face after the murders were discovered. People forget how brave. I was nervous going Friday to the hearing, knowing that they're going to be talking about me. I was really nervous. I go, and I got my friends. And you have all these fantasies of what will you say or do something. I wasn't invited to say anything. I had plenty to say if I was invited, but I wasn't going to cause any kind of scene. I had to be asked questions, and I was never directly asked any questions. But I was nervous. But I wasn't on stand. I was under oath. I wasn't in front of hundreds of people. I didn't have to walk out through crowds and crowds of people and photographers and know that once I testified, my name would be in the paper forever for being a witness in the Starved Rock murder trial. Heck, nowadays, I don't know if any of those people, when they died, but their obits would have that in there. And Joe Ball, who a former employee of Starved Rock Lodge, was one of the people who testified in the Starved Rock murder trial. That's a claim to fame. No matter how you feel about the trial. How many people you know actually sat on the stand and testified in a murder trial? And if he was downstairs shaving, writing a letter, or something like that, why did he change his story? Or did he change his story? Or was that the truth, that he really took the ride? That was another thing about Weger. Some says, he was a friend of Weger's, I was a friend of Weger's. Weger had no friends. He had no friends. What he needed was a car. He didn't have a car. He walked every place and got a ride. He needed a ride. He needed a friend with a car.
When Harlan Warren, former state's attorney, decided he was going to attempt to solve this case, he settled in on the 12 by 20 ply twine that was used to tie up the victims. Twine that was linked to the lodge. Your thoughts?
Chester was asked in the night of his confession where you get the twine. He said from a ball of twine that's in the kitchen at Starved Rock Lodge. Night of his confession, they had this picture because they already knew that. They already had suspicions that it was exact twine from there, to the point that they made him initial this photograph, CW. This was from his confession.
So having, according to his confession, killed the victims that are laying out, visible from the sky, he does hear a plane overhead and says, oops, I better drag these bodies up into the cave so they don't see this.
You left out one point.
What? Okay,
where
am I at?
He looked up and saw a red and white airplane over the canyon. He named the colors. So after the confession, and I don't know when exactly, just a day or two after the night of his confession, one of the county cops go to the nearest airport, right? That would be the Ottawa airport. He pulls in there, he parks his car in front of a red and cream colored airplane. He walks out of his car to that plane, didn't talk to anybody else, to that plane, opens up the logbook, March 14th, 1960, 1:30 in the afternoon, Homer Shabanoff was the pilot. Goes the airport manager, hey, did this plane, did Homer take this plane out? He's a pilot from Streeter, Illinois, and take the plane. And he says, yeah, I kind of remember that. He took it up, he wanted to fly over the park. And they said, yeah, you should call him about it. They contacted the pilot, and the pilot, yeah, he said, yeah, you know, I did fly over the park that day because I was checking out Plum Island. Plum Island is right out in the middle of the Illinois River, right outside the park. And if you look at a map of St. Louis Canyon and Plum Island and draw a circle around it when he made his flights over it, because he was checking out, there was an airstrip on there, and he wanted to see if it's iced over, but just wanted to see the condition of the airstrip on the Plum Island. It's not there anymore. It's a nature preserve now. Nobody's allowed even on it. So if you look at a map and see it, just imagine a circle of a plane going over. You go over Plum Island, go over St. Louis Canyon. Plum Island, go over St. Louis Canyon. When I found that out, somebody explained to me how Chester did. Mr. Haley was sitting here in our conversation. Well, the police told him about that. Who? When? Are you making that up? Do you have any evidence that anybody told him that? Are you saying that the police knew that and waited to contact the pilot? Or are you saying that the pilot was in on it too? That the pilot knew that he was going to be asked about the Starved Rock murders, but no, let's not bring that out until after we get Weger. Let's just keep that. So did the pilot lie about the flight? Did the logbook lie about the flight? Did the airport manager lie about the flight? Weger confirmed that he was in the canyon at the time of the murders by seeing that airplane. There's no other way to explain away. All I know that the pilot and the airplane didn't come up until after the confessions. And the only reason they looked for that plane is because Chester told them to. Just think if Chester said, why'd you move the bodies? Oh, I thought they were out in the open too much and I just pulled them up. And he never mentions the plane, okay? If he never mentioned the plane, what? Then we wouldn't have the plane. That's the nail.
It's the one thing that puts him in the canyon.
Well, there's a lot of other things puts in the canyon.
It's one thing that puts him there.